In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about Ozempic and other weight loss drugs are available. And I'm going to be talking about should you or should you not take it? So, yes, today, on today's podcast, I'm a little bit nervous. We're going to be talking about Ozempic and other drugs probably similar to Ozempic. Now, obviously, Ozempic's like the hot topic of the moment. So I got asked just the other day, what are your thoughts on it? So I thought I would do a podcast on it. Now, it's an interesting thing because obviously this is not a new thing. So weight loss drugs are not new. There's been many before them. Weight loss interventions, perhaps we call them, have been they've been around for a long period of time. And I think this class of drugs is obviously, it's blown up very recently for a number of different reasons, which we'll probably talk about in a minute. I mean, number one, the reason it's blown up is it is super, super effective. So it really does help or not help, really does instigate really significant weight loss. Now, with that, I've never been the sort to try and demonize or say no to anything. I would much rather try to educate and help people make their own personal decision because I don't necessarily think that listening to me is going to be the decider whether you take it or you don't. But I just like to kind of almost start the discussion on things that you can be thinking about. So, like number one, like I said, it does work. E.g., excuse my voice, I got that chesty infection. It does produce large amounts of weight loss. Now, there are some important things to note with it. And actually, I probably prefer to think in terms of if you are going to take it, how do you make it as effective as possible? Make it as beneficial for you as possible, because like with anything, there are side effects. So, for example, it has been shown already. Now, the one thing I should say is obviously they don't know any long-term effects because it's not really been around long enough. And my thought always on this type of thing is it's really, really, what's the word? It can be a little bit nerve-wracking from the long-term perspective, because I always just think of vaping, for example. Like vaping came along as like the big thing to stop people smoking. Now suddenly they've discovered that actually it's super, super negative for you and you've got to stop vaping, and they're going to stop everyone vaping, full stop. They're going to make it illegal, I believe. But that's just a classic example of how these things kind of work. So I would always obviously bear that in mind with taking anything new. I personally wouldn't want to be the first one testing it. I personally wouldn't want to be the one finding out in a few years' time whether long-term it's healthy for you or not. I also think another example of that is I know obviously I've got young children, so I'm quite aware of that all the studies have now been done on screen time for children, phones, social media, and things like that. So now suddenly the recommendations are no screens, or well, certainly no phones and social media until I think the latest thing is 14 years of age. Now, obviously they couldn't recommend that initially because they didn't have the long-term data. So with obviously something like this, I would always caveat that you don't really know the long-term effects. They certainly do know some of the effects. Obviously there is weight loss, but the thing to note with the weight loss, and so if you are going to take these style of drugs, first and foremost is to understand that you have the potential to lose a significant amount of muscle if you don't do something to try to avoid that. So I think they have shown that 50% of weight loss can be muscle. And the reason that that's really detrimental for you in the long term is obviously when you lose muscle, well, besides losing strength, it's also your metabolism starts to decrease. So I'm assuming you're looking at not being on these style of drugs forever, in which case you have to think about the coming off side of it, not just the taking of it. So it's no good if you lose significant amounts of weight, but a lot of it is muscle, and then you come off taking that drug and your metabolism's slower. Now your appetite will potentially rebound, and you've also got that double whammy of then a slower metabolism. So a couple of recommendations that are quite clear now are resistance training, so weightlifting and eating a certain amount of protein to be able to sustain your muscle, which most highly recommend is 1 gram per pound of protein. So I always like to think about the side of coming out of using this style of drug. So like I said, the other big thing that they don't really tackle, they will make you lose weight, but you have to think about the psychological thoughts around food, around eating, around lifestyle, and you want to be thinking about behavior change. So again, like, I don't see a dissimilarity besides effectiveness, besides that this works easier than, say, extreme diets that, Lighter Life, Cambridge diet. There's been a lot of these cycles of extreme weight loss modalities. This is slightly different because it's taking, injections, it's taking something, so it doesn't require as much willpower as dieting does. But the thing it does emulate, I guess, is the fact that you tend not to think of this as being on it forever. So then inevitably you have to be thinking about what happens after. I also think it's important to make sure that you're looking at it objectively for you, because like I said, the problem with these things is a lot of the time people are looking at, celebrities, for example. This now makes it clear. I think everyone becomes a little bit more aware of, all these celebrities that are promoting certain things and saying that they lost all this weight doing some Pilates and taking a green smoothie, when actually you'll find out that they were taking these styles of drugs. So the thing with that is, it's fine if you were to know that, but if you are projecting a different reality, people tend to watch this reality and think that they should be able to do the same, but they don't realize that they're at a complete disadvantage because they're not taking these weight loss drugs. So, that's just a side point, but I think the most important thing is to think of, is it right for you? And if it is, and you decide, like I said, I don't think I'm going to necessarily be the deciding factor on whether you do it or not. I think looking at things objectively is important. Looking at things from the right place of information. I don't think a celebrity's Instagram will probably ever be the right source of information as to whether you should do it. And think about what happens afterwards. That's, I think, the most important thing. So if you are going to do it, resistance training for sure, eating enough protein for sure, but then thinking about behavior change, right? So it's no different to when people would do Lighter Life or do any form of extreme way of losing weight, but then didn't think about what happens when I stop doing that. I need to change my behavior and use this time period to change my behavior so that when I do go back to what you'd term normal eating, well, then you've made behavior change as well, because you can't go back, do the exact same thing you were doing and expect to keep the weight off. And I think that's the important thing. So to note is resistance training for sure, thinking about your behavior change if you are going to do this, and think about what happens afterwards. And obviously the other thing to note is no one really knows the long-term effects. And I guess that's obviously pivotally important, particularly at the stage you're doing it. So they have absolute value, but making sure that you're the right person that should be doing it. Extreme weight loss health examples are very different to, what you'd probably term a lot of the celebrities are using it for, which is short-term weight loss for events or for holidays or things like that. Well, you can end up doing yourself an awful lot of damage with that type of mindset, because inevitably you are doing something for the short-term impact of then going away on holiday, which no one eats their best on holiday. No one exercises their best on holiday. Very few do. Otherwise, it's not much of a holiday. So inevitably, you are making significant change to your body and then going away and actually being more, normally more overeating, more alcohol. And unless you're going to be taking that style of drugs whilst you're away, which, I'm sure some people do, but probably, it's not something that people would look forward to doing if they're going away on holiday. So just be aware, be mindful of where you're getting your information. Like I said, it's factual now that you need to eat the right amount of protein. You need to do resistant training to try and minimize that muscle loss. That's a critical thing, is you're trying to minimize the muscle loss, which is true of most, it's true of any form of weight loss effort, actually, that normally your body is predisposed to losing the muscle. So you have to do a lot of emphasis on maintaining that muscle, because to lose muscle is counterproductive to the long-term health benefits of losing the weight. So I guess, like I said, I'm not one to necessarily demonize anything. I think it's just looking at it objectively, making sure your source of information is from the correct place, and then deciding objectively, is this right for me? Am I willing to not know the long-term effects of this and take it? And also, am I willing to change my behavior so that when I do stop taking this drug, that I don't go back to where I was before?